Back when I played the original Mega Man as a kid, or rather Rockman, I couldn't even imagine how massive this franchise is. My first pick at it was, funnily enough, with a small book of cheat codes for NES games. Rockman 4, Rockman 5, Rockman 6! I knew a guy who had Mega Man 2 and heard of 3 existing, but 6 of them? Yeah, there is no way they're all real. It's probably just more crappy bootlegs like whatever the hell this is. Oh, if only I knew. Anyway, Mega Man 4. There isn't much to talk about regarding the game's development this time, as everything went pretty smoothly. One of the few hurdles to overcome was sorting through over 70,000 submissions for the Robot Master Design Contest. They even liked one of them so much that they completely scrapped one of the completed stages and redid it entirely from scratch, just so that it aligns thematically with this new character. Eventually, Mega Man 4 came out on December 6, 1991 in Japan as Rockman 4: The New Ambition. Americans got the game soon after on January 1st, 1992, and Europeans had to wait for the whole year until December 14th. And would you look at that, the American box art is actually decent this time. The game opens up by showing off increased production values with an actual cinematic cutscene, which tells you about Dr. Wily's first rampage and Mega Man's origins. Since then, Mega Man has already defeated Wily 3 times, and last time, it seemed like Doc was done for. However, history repeats and a new challenger appears. Dr. Mikhail Sergeyevich Cossack gets fed up with Dr. Light getting all the attention and sends out 8 of his robot masters to cause havoc. You know, like any sensible adult would. Well, the villain may be different, but nothing really changed here. Let's pick a stage and see how this goes. Mega Man retains all of his initial abilities from the previous game. You can still slide to get through narrow passages and gain a boost of speed, as well as call Rush for help. Though you do need to unlock Rush Jet and Rush Marine again for whatever reason. Rush Jet got heavily nerfed too. In Mega Man 3 you could fly around as you please, but now it works like item 2, except you can slightly adjust its altitude. And Rush Marine is still only ever useful in 2 whole places in the entire game. But don't worry buddy, we still love you. In addition to these old tricks, Mega Man also gets a new ability. If you hold down the fire button he will charge his Buster, and when you release it, Mega Man will fire a bigger, stronger projectile. To be precise, at maximum charge, your shot will deal 3 points of damage. All around, this is a pretty useful ability. It not only allows you to deal more damage, but you can also plow through multiple weaker enemies in a single shot. Personally, I don't use it all that much. More damage and bigger projectiles are nice, but you won't get full benefits unless you charge it all the way. I find it easier to just rapid fire normal shots unless it's a fight where you have to wait until the enemy becomes vulnerable. Right, Drillman? Also, it makes a very annoying sound while you hold the charge. Yeah. I have one more grievance with the charge shot, but we'll save that for later. Overall, Mega Man 4 is where all the core mechanics the series is known for finally came together, and it's also where they were implemented the best among the NES games in my opinion. This game also introduces a new little helper. This is Eddie. He will appear at certain points in the stages and give you a random item. I really like this little guy, he makes you feel that the folks back home are actively trying to help you. Of course he can give you something you don't want, so here's a little trick. If you don't take the item Eddie gave you, return to the previous screen, then go back to him, Eddie will appear again and give you another item, possibly something you actually want. Now it's time to look at the stages, so let's start with aesthetics. Believe it or not, Mega Man 4 looks even prettier than the previous games. There are plenty of beautiful animated backgrounds, or at least animated elements, and even stages without them still look up to par. Some stages also stand out thematically. You look at them and go, yeah, this is Pharaoh Man's stage, and that is Dustman's stage. And speaking of Dustman, his stage features a surprisingly somber theme song, which actually adds a lot to its atmosphere, and I think it's pretty appropriate because you are more or less going through a robot crematorium. Dustman's theme is not the only one though. Pharaoh Man also has a very appropriate tune playing in his stage, and most other tracks are great too. When it comes to gameplay, almost every Robot Master stage features a specific gimmick. Diveman has shifting water levels, which is pretty impressive in technical terms. Dustman has these presses with debris that impedes your progress. Toadman has water currents that push you around. Some stages have unique enemies that play into the gimmick. For example, Pharaoh Man has these footholder looking things that you need to ride across beds of spikes. But the most interesting gimmick isn't Brightman's stage. Here you will encounter these flying light bulb enemies that drop bombs that split into multiple projectiles. You can destroy them early to prevent their attack, but doing so will make the stage go completely pitch black, and you'll have to shoot this little guy to light your surroundings up again. And if you're not careful, you can fall into a pit you couldn't even see. Sadly, this gimmick ends up being underused because these enemies only appear in 2 rooms. Most unfortunate. The only Robot Master stage without any dedicated gimmicks is Skullman's, which is a pretty straightforward enemy gauntlet. It does feature a few unique enemies, and this new Joe variant in particular that can only be destroyed by a fully charged Mega Buster shot or specific weapons. And, you know, skeletons are pretty cool. Everyone likes skeletons. How do I know? Even you, dear viewer, have your own skeleton. Their popularity is unparalleled. This game also introduces 2 new enemy types that ended up becoming serious mainstays. The first one is the shield attacker that flies back and forth trying to tackle you with its shield, but also makes it invincible from the front. The other is Up and Down's, and I absolutely hate them. They shoot out of bottomless pits when you try to jump over them with explicit intent of making you lose a life simply for not knowing that they are there. If I ever hear anyone complain about anything in Mega Man 4, it's usually Up and Downs. One final thing left to mention in regards to the stages is the minor exploration element they introduce. 2 Robot Master stages have points where you can go off the beaten path, and should you do so, you will be rewarded with 2 neat utility items. The first one is the balloon that functions identically to item 1 from Mega Man 2, with an added benefit of being able to crush you to death. The other is the wire adapter. You shoot a hook straight up at the ceiling, then pull yourself towards it. These items are occasionally useful, but are not necessary to beat the game in the slightest. I'd argue the exploration needed to get these utility items is more important here, especially seeing where the franchise will eventually go. The Robot Master fights are pretty good once again. I don't think any of them are particularly hard except maybe Pharaoh Man and Bright Man, but most are still pretty fun. The one exception is Drillman, who likes to stall for time by digging underground where you can't hurt him. Dustman also has an attack that makes him invincible for some reason, but he doesn't annoy me as much. Several bosses also have rather interesting patterns. I'm sure everyone already knows about Toadman and his eccentricities. Skullman is programmed to never act on his own and only respond to your actions, as though he doesn't actually want to fight. But the award for the most interesting pattern goes to Brightman. Most of the time, Brightman either tries to shoot you or jumps to land on top of you. But sometimes he uses his signature flash stopper to freeze you in place. Even if you manage to position yourself in a spot where his bullets won't hit, you still have to pray he doesn't simply stomp you like a Goomba. Without knowing how Brightman's AI works, it may seem like avoiding damage is a flip of a coin. So here's how it works. Brightman only uses flash stopper maximum of 3 times, and he always does so when he has a specific amount of health left. The only reliable way of avoiding getting hit is to count your shots and deal enough damage at a time to skip these points. I am pretty sure this is the most complex programming for a Mega Man boss on the NES, and figuring out a way around it was pretty fun. Of course, if you're using his weakness to Rain Flush, you'll have to deal with Flash Stopper anyway, because it deals just enough damage to hit every threshold. And speaking of which, time to look at the special weapons. Oh, by the way, look at this new pause menu. In Mega Man 2 and 3 you had to switch between 2 pages to select certain weapons, and that was kind of a pain. Now look at this. Everything fits nicely on a single screen. It may not seem like a big deal, but I really appreciate this change. Anyway, special weapons. We have already seen Rain Flush, which is more or less a screen nuke, which destroys even armored enemies like these adorable bats, and even metals. Dive Missile is a homing torpedo that tracks the enemies, and pretty effectively, I might add. Drill Bomb is a good weapon for times when you just want to utterly annihilate someone, as long as you know what can and cannot be annihilated. These big guys, for example, get blown up with 2 bombs. You can also explode the drill mid-flight by pressing the fire button again, which I don't think the game or the manual tell you about. Flash Stopper is more or less the good version of Flashman's Time Stopper that doesn't eat all of your energy in a single use and lets you shoot while the time is stopped. Pharaoh Shot can be aimed up and down at an angle, which is already pretty good. But you can also charge it to create a miniature sun that will hang above Mega Man until you release the button, and can be used as a makeshift shield against destroyable projectiles or personal space invaders. Ring Boomerang has a very short range, but it can pierce shields, allowing you to destroy shield attackers from the front and even damage Skullman when he's hiding behind his Skull Barrier. And speaking of which, Skull Barrier is unfortunately one of the worst barrier type special weapons in the series. It dissipates after a single hit and cannot be thrown like Leaf Shield or most other weapons of its kind really. It does have its uses like protection against up and downs or boulders in Drillman stage, but it's not something you'd want to use most of the time, and even using it against Diveman as his weakness is a bit awkward. I prefer to just use the Mega Buster here. And this is a good time to go back to the Charge Shot. All special weapons except Pharaoh Shot deal 4 points of damage to the bosses. There are no more wild damage values like in previous games. Charge Shot deals 3, just 1 point of difference, and you have it from the get-go, so you already have some advantage over the bosses right from the start. This ends up diminishing the importance of special weapons and discouraging experimentation. The game as a whole is actually easier than the previous ones, and jumping ahead a little bit, this trend will continue with Mega Man 5 and 6 as well. Thankfully, they never go too far and make it a walk in the park either, so you still need to keep your wits about you. It does have a rather high drop rate for extra lives though. You can even get multiple drops in the same room, it's quite weird. At first I thought they did something in the Legacy Collection version, but no, this is also present in the original NES and Complete Works versions. Oh yeah, Rockman Complete Works. Maybe I'll tell you about those one day if I live long enough. Overall, the initial Robot Master stages are great in my opinion. I've heard some people complain about overabundance of spikes, but I don't know, it doesn't seem that bad to me. Some stages are better than others, of course. Ringman stage, for example, has 4 mini-boss fights, which can be quite annoying. But let me tell you, the miniature sun is very useful for blowing up hippos. After you deal with all the Robot Masters, it's time to go after Dr. Cossack, and what do you know, there's some more sweet music here. It's cool how Cossack's castle still introduces new gimmicks, and the first boss even interacts with the arena by breaking the floor. Unfortunately, one of these gimmicks is an auto-scrolling section on the 3rd stage. I really hate auto-scrollers, like, what's the justification here? What's pushing Mega Man forward? Aside from the edges of a screen, I mean. Once you make it to Dr. Cossack himself and hurt him enough, Proto Man teleports in with a little girl called Kalinka. Turns out Dr. Wily kidnapped her and forced Cossack to fight Mega Man, so all that's left is to kick Wily's teeth in again. And here, I want to mention the password system. It no longer saves your E-tanks, which kind of sucks, but it's not really a problem. The real problem here is that there are no passwords for Cossack's and Wily's stages. You had to beat the castle stages in one sitting in Mega Man 2 and 3 as well, but this game has 2 castles, Cossack's and Wily's. That's 8 stages, well, 7.5, and you have to beat it all in one go, which might be a little too much to ask for some. There are also no checkpoints in the boss corridor in all the castle stages for some reason, so that's fun. Now, the stages themselves aren't too difficult, and you can get plenty of extra lives and E-tanks to help you. But you still have to get through a boss rush in the penultimate level, followed by the worst designed Wily Machine fight in the series, if comments to my perfect boss run video are anything to go by. So, if you get fed up with it and turn the game off here, you'll have to start all the way back at the first stage of Cossack's castle. Honestly, I'm not sure what happened here. Mega Man 3 also had issues with checkpoints, so it would make sense to avoid them this time. Lack of passwords between castles is also rather annoying, especially if you want to take your time with the game. But you know, I don't think these issues impact the game all that much. I didn't even know they existed until halfway through working on this video when I saw another guy stream his first playthrough, and he finished the game just fine in 4 hours. And let's be honest, if you're going to play this casually, you're probably going to do so through emulation. Or official emulation. And it's not like I can convince you not to use save states. Overall, Mega Man 4 is another step up for the series, yeah, imagine that. It has its flaws, some of them are small like up and downs, you know, existing. Or this sound. Some of them are major, like the lack of checkpoints before the castle bosses. But when it comes to gameplay, the NES series peaked on this game in my opinion. All the core mechanics associated with the series came together here. I may not be the biggest fan of Charge Shot, but it's still an important addition, especially considering how it later evolved in the future Mega Man X series. All other elements are really well polished as well, and even technical problems that plagued Mega Man 2 and 3 have disappeared almost entirely. If I had to choose which of the classic Mega Man games I like the most, well, I would probably still say Mega Man 1 because of the sentimental value it holds for me, but purely from the objective point of view, this is it. If you could only play one Mega Man game on the NES, I'd say make it this one. Thank you for watching this video, dear viewer. If you liked it, you know what to do. Keep on rocking, and I'll see you next time.